This is video 1 in the Introduction to Simio Animation module. In this video we'll be discussing Simio's basic animation components. In particular we'll discuss viewing in 2D and 3D modes, moving around the model, and we'll also discuss and demonstrate how to use Simio's basic drawing tools. Throughout this module we'll be using a basic source server sync model, so let's go ahead and build that now. So we're just going to take our source, we're going to take our server, and we're going to take our sync, and then we'll connect these guys up using a paths so we can see the entities moving between objects. So we'll just connect those guys up, and then we will also have a default entity here that we have defined. So again, we're going to start with this base model, and then we're going to add to it as we move through the module. So when we build Simio models, we are building in 2D and 3D simultaneously. And so if you go back to the model and we look at our view ribbon, you can see up here in this upper left corner we have 2D and 3D. So we can simply switch back and forth by either using the ribbon or by using the 2 for 2D and the 3 for 3D. Also, when we look at the view ribbon, which we're going to do in much more detail in the following slides, we also see a visibility ribbon, and the visibility ribbon is important when you're running a model as to which components you can actually see or not see, which are not visible while the model runs. So I go to the visibility and I say turn the labels off. We can see that the object labels are off. I can also turn just the node labels off. We don't have any node labels here. We can turn the arrows off, the links off, the nodes off. So if you open a model and you are expecting to see labels or paths and you don't see them, you want to check the visibility and make sure that what you want to see is actually turned on. So as I mentioned, you're simultaneously building models in 2 and 3D. In general, you're going to be working when you're doing model development using the 2D view, but it's important to remember that you're also building that 3D component also. So again, if I just switch to 3D mode here by either the ribbon or by hitting the 3 key, you can see that the objects do have that third dimension. And so it's important to understand how Simio deals with location and scale. You can see that we have the axis here, and if you just look at the faint numbers up here, you can see this is minus 10 meters and this is 0, so this is the minus direction and this is the plus direction. And so each object, if we pick one of our objects here and go to the general properties that we see here, and we have physical characteristics, and you can see that we have size and location. So if I just expand on that location, open the location property, you can see that all objects have an X, Y, and Z coordinate. And so this is the X direction, this is the Z direction, and the Y direction is that when we switch to 3D, and you can see the Y direction here. And so if I hold down the Shift key and grab server 1, for example, I'm now moving in the Y direction. So if I release it and then go back to 2D mode, it doesn't look any different. But then if I look at the size, if I go back to the physical characteristics and look at my location, we can see now I am in the 1.05 meters in the Y direction. And so if I go back and reset that, go back here and just manually reset that Y back to 0 and go to 3D, you can now see that the server is back where it originally was. And so again, it's important to realize when you're building the model that the scale, the size of objects matters, and the location. And so if I look at the relative position of source 1 and server 1, you can see they're approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 meters apart in the X direction, and 1, 2, 3, 4, a little under 5 meters in the Z direction. So when you calculate travel time, those locations become important. So in terms of moving around the model, there's also a lot of shortcuts. In particular, you can look at navigate. You can hit the H key for navigation tips. So if I go back and let's just jump into 3D mode here, and let me start the model running, and I can hit H, and we can then see some information or some hints on how to move around. If you hit H again, that help goes away. If I hit R, then I'm automatically going to start rotating on the axis. If I hit W, then the camera is placed at floor level, or at the Y location of 0. So again, if we rotate now, we're seeing the model from that you would see if you were walking around within the model. So let's stop this model, go back in 2D mode. As I said, which you're going to do the majority of the model building will be in 2D mode. And so you can also, as always, search the Simio help. So let's just jump in here and have a look at that. So what I want to search is I want to search for a view, and in particular, if you look at changing the view, you can see, then hit refresh to get rid of the highlights, and now we can see all of the shortcuts that we have and how to interact with the model. And as you start building more models, you will learn some of these things, but you can see there are a whole lot of different options you can use, including the mouse wheel and changing the zoom level and all of those things. So I would recommend that you stop the video for a little bit, look through that help, and then just look through how to move around the model, change the visibility, and so on. And then come back and we'll talk about named views and camera sequences. As you move around the model with your mouse, you're actually setting the camera placement. So if I'm in 2D mode here and I zoom in or zoom out or move around, I'm basically looking the camera. We think about the camera as being straight above, looking down. And if I'm in 3D mode, as I just either move or zoom or pan around, then I'm actually setting the camera placement. I can also have named views, and so let me go back here and let's just name a couple of views. So if we look at the model here, we can also just go and do the view all. If you hit the view all in the view ribbon, then it automatically zooms to a level where you can see all of the objects. And let's go back and add a view. So look up here in the named view section. I'm just going to click view, and I'm going to name view 0 whole for whole model, and I can also give it a hotkey. So I'm going to give it the hotkey W. And then I'm going to just jump into 3D mode and zoom around a little bit, and now I'm going to name this view. So now I'm going to add another view, and we'll call this view 3D1. So let's just do 3D1, and we're going to give this the hotkey A, because the hotkey 3 is already the default for switching into 3D mode. Now I have two views, so I can go and change my views, and I can go back and forth between whole and 3DA, and I can also use the hotkeys that I've assigned, so I can just hit the W key and the A key to switch between those views. So let's just name one more view. Let's just name this one. This will be 3D2, so let's just change that one and put 3D2, and we will have this one be B. So now we have three views. We have whole, then we have 3D1, and we have 3D2. We can also change the camera placement in run mode. So let me zoom in a little bit here, and let me go to the run ribbon, and I'm going to run, and then I'm going to pause the model here. And now we have two entities here that are dynamic entities. So if I just right click on that, you can see it trackable with camera. And so if I go back to my view, and then I can do camera placement here, and so by default the camera moves with the object, but I can also do things like follow behind. So if now that I want to run, I can follow behind. Let's see here, I've got to run and do change item right here, trackable with camera, there we go. And now I have follow behind set, and so now you can see that we're actually following behind with that object. The object was destroyed, went to the sink, and so we went back to the default camera placement. So again, this is something you should definitely experiment with, because there's a lot of options, and you can really make some nice animation. The last thing we're going to cover here before we do drawing tools is, now that we have our three named views, W, A, and B, we can create a sequence. And so we can go back into our main view, and I want to look in the camera sequence, and I'm going to create a sequence. So we'll just call this one SEQ1, and we'll give it a hotkey. Let's give it a hotkey of Z. And now that we've created it, I go back into Edit, and then I can assign the views. So I have 3 named views. So we'll just do whole, and we specify 2 things. How long do you want to stay in the view, and then how long do you want to transition? So let's just leave them as the defaults, 3D1, 3D2, and then we'll go back to whole. So now what's going to happen in the camera sequence is we're going to transition, we're going to stay in whole for 5 seconds and then spend 2 seconds transitioning and so on. So now if we start the model running, and then I'm going to hit the hotkey Z, and we're going to see, you saw that we jumped to W. 5 seconds, we're going to transition to A, stay here for 5 seconds, then transition to B for 5 seconds. There we go. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we should be transitioning back to W. And so we've run through that entire sequence. And so with camera sequences, we can make arbitrarily long sequences, and this is a really nice way if you're going to make a video for a presentation or something like that, is you can plan all of the views that you want, and then let Simio sequence through those by specifying the seconds to stay and the seconds to next view. And again, this is something, as with the other components of animation, you should really experiment with, because it's a really powerful and useful feature. And the final thing we're going to do in this video is talk a little bit about Simio's basic drawing tools. And so you see we have a drawing ribbon here. So let me jump over into Simio and have the drawing ribbon. And what we're going to do here is just kind of touch the high points. So we can draw rectangles and polygons. We can also draw polylines. So let me just draw a little polyline here. There we go. And then just right click to end. And so if we look at these objects in 3D mode, you're going to see that they're both flat. I can also give the objects height. So if I go back in 2D mode, let me scroll and see here. Zoom out just a little bit, and then if I click on my object, let's see here. There we go. Select my polyline. It's not letting me select my polyline. Okay, we'll just deal with the square, and then I can give it an object height. And so if I go and say, okay, let's make that 1 meter high, and then go back in 3D mode, you can see that we do in fact have height. Okay, so get the polyline, we can also do that. Go back and finally got the polyline in the drawing, and then let's change its height too. Let's make this one 2 meters. And we can do things like add texture. So if I want to have that texture, or if I want to have, let's say, chipped bricks, and so on. And so by adjusting the height, we can give the objects height in this Y direction. And so using these drawing tools, we can make buildings, we can make rooms, and all of the things that give the animation the look of the system that you're trying to model. And so we're going to go use some of these tools further in the module, use some of the building tools further in the module, but once again, I highly recommend that you experiment with these drawing tools so that you can get used to how they work. And the one thing that is often confusing is to set the object height, we need to look in the drawing ribbon itself, not in the view ribbon and not in the object. So when we click on the object, we don't set its properties here, right? Because these are drawn and they're not actual active model objects. We have to go to the drawing ribbon to set that to set the object height. So that's the end of this video, and in the next video we'll continue with more of Simio's basic animation features.